Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
When people start businesses and they fail, they're always like, why? Or what can you learn on a 30,000 foot level? But I'm trying to think about it from, here are things that I did that are hard skills that not everyone has and that I think are valuable and will prove useful going forward in some other way.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Jeff Weisbein. Jeff is the founder and editor-in-chief at BestTechie. His journey into technology, startups, and digital media began at the age of 13, which is when he started BestTechie. While in school, he built BestTechie into a digital media company where he was responsible for leading a team of journalists, editing, planning, and creating content, as well as interviewing various executives for stories. In addition to BestTechie, he's been published on various online publications, including Business to Community, Media Shift, Performance In, and Creator by WeWork. He's also been featured in TechCrunch, The Washington Post, The Next Web, Cheddar, Forbes, Lifehacker, FitSmallBusiness.com, and Product Hunt. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Carolyn, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here too. So let's talk about BestTechie. What inspired you to start that business at such a young age?
So I was pretty young, and this was like the early 2000s. And I don't know if you're familiar with a TV channel that was around at the time. It's actually no longer around, but it was actually founded by the late Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft. And it was called Tech TV. And that channel lived on my TV. My TV just didn't leave that channel. In fact, I remember that the channel number that it was in my house when I was growing up was 175. I just knew that because it never left it. I just saw it all the time. Anyway, so what I ended up doing was I started helping out on these support forums for Tech TV. They had different shows, obviously, and then they had people who came to the different forums and would ask questions and need help and look for advice on different things. And me being a curious 12-year-old and 13-year-old and learning about technology, I decided I wanted to share my insights and knowledge with other people. So I started answering questions for people. And basically what then happened was I became interested in I want to start my own site. I want to create a tech TV thing. My whole thing was that I wanted to build a place where people could come and learn as I was learning, essentially. Mm-hmm. I just viewed the internet as a really great way to share information. So naturally, I did what any 13-year-old without money would do. Mm-hmm. I went to my parents and somehow, I don't know how I did it, honestly. I might have created a list of these are the reasons, I don't remember. But somehow I convinced my parents to let me use their credit card.
Wow.
And I bought the domain and I bought web hosting. And I started this site called BestTechie. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the origin story for it. In fact, it's really interesting because in addition to all that, the original domain was actually besttechie.net. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is, and the .com was available at the time, but 13-year-old me thought .net sounded cooler. So I just went with that. And that's what the site started as besttechie.net.
I see. And then how did it grow from there? Because I'm guessing you built the site, you bought the domain name, and then I guess it's starting with mainly you answering questions about technology. But how did it expand to a point where you were leading teams with editors and journalists and content planning?
No, that's a great question. It was quite the journey. So originally, like you said, it was just me. And what I ended up doing was I want to say it was August 2004, I realized that Tech TV was being sold to a company called G4, which was owned by Comcast. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of redoing the entire network, and they were getting rid of the site, and they were getting rid of the forums. And this is what I credit my first kind of entrepreneurial instincts kicking in. Mm-hmm. Because what happened was I recognized an opportunity. The opportunity was that the forums that I had become a respected member at, where people knew who I was and knew that I knew what I was talking about, because I had helped so many people over the years. And I decided to start my own forums. I found software, I launched my own forums, and the BestTechie forums were born. And it was really the first kind of business-minded opportunity that I took advantage of, in the sense that these Tech TV forums wouldn't exist anymore. I knew people would be looking for a new place to go to get help with their technology. Mm. So I decided to jump on that. And a lot of people joined. And it was a really kind of great entry into, realizing that I could take something that I was doing personally and expand on it and get even more people on the site and turn that into a money-making opportunity for me. So from once I started getting more people on the site and once we started getting some traction and getting people coming to the forums, and I started writing a little bit more on my own. And it's actually interesting because if you go look at the BestTechie archives, these site archives, they actually started in 2006, because that's when I finally installed WordPress. And WordPress was pretty brand new then.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, you can kind of see how my writing evolved and got better over the years. As I got older, obviously, I learned to write better. And not just that, not just getting it from school, but also the more you write, the better at it you get. So as I slowly did that, I started building this community. And people would come to my site to get advice or help or just to read about the latest technology that I was playing with. And then from there, I was able to start implementing different monetization schemes. And that's when it started to allow me to be able to hire some people to work with me to be able to build up the site. So that's when I was like, all right, I'm doing a great job right now, but I realized that I'm making some money now. Now I have the opportunity to take it another step further. And that's when I realized that I wanted to bring on other bloggers and journalists to work with, to create content that was interesting to our audience. And one of the important things that I realized when doing that was that it's not just getting more people, it's about identifying kind of the core brand and the core voice for the site. Something I spent a lot of time obviously developing on my own prior to all that, which is clearly something I looked for when hiring people as well.
Sure. And how did you monetize BestTechie when you realized that you were getting an audience and those opportunities were coming up?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the things that we did early on was we used Google AdSense, just the basic AdSense platform, which was great, especially because it was easy to sign up for. And it was also a way to generate money that was non-intrusive. And Google recognized in the early days with AdSense and their ads on their display network that these ads didn't have to be intrusive like banners, like in the early days of the web were. So I was a big proponent of that platform early on because I liked that the ads were not intrusive. I liked that there weren't pop-ups and like click me, like flashing a million times. That was very important to me because I really took the integrity of the brand very seriously. And so that was the early days. And then as we got more advanced and as we started getting more traffic, more traction, and more people on the site, we're able to, then my favorite thing to do is to work directly with the advertiser or the sponsor. That's harder to do on a smaller scale, but if you can get to a point where you can do that, I truly believe there's more money that way in direct kind of ad sales. In fact, there is. It also gives you more control, but also more ways to kind of work with your partner, your advertiser, in a way to come up with unique ways to reach your audience that makes sense without tarnishing the brand in any particular way. So a lot of what we did was advertising methods. We also worked closely with software companies on affiliate marketing, and we would recommend products based on what people were looking, based on any issues they were having. Like, for example, one of the big products that we became a big kind of proponent of and recommender of was Malwarebytes anti-malware, which is a phenomenal product. And we would be able to recommend it because we felt comfortable recommending it and I knew that it worked. But it also was a great way for us to generate some revenue through affiliate marketing and affiliate sales.
Wow. So you really saw this opportunity with the change of Tech TV over to G4. You really captured this opportunity in the market that said, now I'm doing something that isn't replicated on TV anymore. And I've got this audience and, you were able to expand it from just answering questions on your own to bringing in a whole team. And how else did your content expand from then? Like, how did you see it grow? And did you start exploring other types of content like video or other things like that too?
Yeah, that is something we certainly did. Let me jump back before I started using WordPress when I literally first launched the site. It was just an HTML template, couple pages that I put together with information. And I was blogging before blogging was like this was like 2003. And it was just an HTML page that I would update and put the new content on top of the old content And, there was no direct links or anything like that. It's just people came to the site and read what was on the homepage. Mm-hmm. And then as we grew the business, we got into different types of content. So one of the things I realized after spending a lot of time analyzing the different metrics that we looked at for engagement and what was working, what people came to the site for, I kind of narrowed it down to 3 or so categories, which basically were how-to content, mm-hmm. insights and analysis that just helped people understand topics in more detail, and then also reviews. That was the third category. And what we did was we ended up focusing a lot of our efforts on creating content that was resonating with our audience. So we would still do other stuff like, news bits and things like that. But we really focused heavily on creating content surrounded to how-tos, insights and analysis, kind of unique looks in the industry, as well as these reviews. And I took it to another level where, fast forward from 2006 to around 2008, I started realizing that YouTube was such a great platform. And this is in the early days of YouTube, mm-hmm. where it's like people are, still today, even and back then, were, it's like I don't know if people realize it's the number 2 search engine on the web. Mm-hmm. People look and go to YouTube to find out how to do things or to learn about things, not just for entertainment purposes. So I was able to capitalize on that by creating video content early on, hundreds of videos, and drive traffic not only back to BestTechie, but also build a separate kind of community on YouTube. And that proved very successful as well. We were able to generate revenues through the YouTube Partner Program and sponsorships of videos and things like that. And we evolved then from not just text, right, into video. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things I realized was you can create video content, but sometimes people still want to read. They're not interested in the video content. So what we would end up doing is I would create a video, we'd publish it on YouTube, and then we would embed the video back on the site, but we would create a little write-up to go along with it. So that way, if you didn't want to watch the video, at least you could still get the benefit of what the video was about by reading the post. So that had huge SEO benefits for us, which helped us grow even further.
Wow, that's great. I'm listening to you describe your content strategy, and I'm thinking it's right in line with all of the best practices and advice that are given out for new content creators. It's like if you're making videos, you should have written text along with it or transcripts and have different types of content and just continually have a lot of content. So you were really ahead of the curve, and you were able to see these trends like right when they were just happening and understand, the whole shift over from flashy banner advertising over to AdWords and less intrusive advertising and being able to capitalize on that. That's really cool. And that's really a testament to BestTechie, which has been around, well, when did it start? It's been around for a while now.
Yeah, so the site officially launched May 7th, 2003.
Wow.
So it's been around for 15 years.
Fantastic. So in that time, it's clearly gone through a lot of changes and evolutions. What would you say was your biggest challenge that you've faced or overcome as you were launching and running BestTechie?
Let's start with one of the major first challenges that I faced. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to talk about this. And one of the things I feel like people today kind of take this for granted, but keep in mind, this was in 2003, 2004, early days of me launching the site. And there weren't, breakout young YouTube stars or anything. So here was an early challenge that I faced. So when I first started helping people on Tech TV forums, it was just an avatar or a username and me typing text. No one could see what I looked like, how old I was, or anything about me. Mm. Only if I shared that information would they know it. And, I was helping people all this time. I developed this reputation, as I mentioned, and people just assumed I was some 40-year-old guy. Mm-hmm. Like they would be talking to me about in emails about their kids and their wife. And I just totally couldn't relate to anything like that. Mm-hmm. It was very, very difficult. So when I first launched the site, I was a little nervous, especially when I launched the forums in 2004, that people wouldn't take me seriously if they realized how old I was. Mm-hmm. And I was very careful for a couple of years just not telling people how old I was because I was scared that they would lose respect for me, that they wouldn't come to my site, things like that. So ultimately, what I ended up doing was I realized I couldn't play this lie forever. And I just made the decision one day, I'm going to tell a couple people that I trust, longtime friends of mine who I met on the site. I'll just tell them and be like, I'll just kind of mention it to them and say, hey, just something you should know. I'm 13. And the response, the reaction at the time was, oh my God, I had no idea. And also, wow, that's really impressive. And the reason I tell this story and about this challenge is because I think it really shaped my view on many things moving forward. Like, for example, don't be afraid to ask people for help, or don't be afraid to reach out and get rejected. And it really kind of helped shape how I kind of look at the world and also how I operate my business.
Yeah, wow, that is really amazing experience, because you're right. Nowadays, it's kind of more common because we have the concept of young YouTube stars and very young people starting their own businesses, and that's much more common. But, 15 years ago, that was a relatively new thing. So, it's, I guess, a bit of a risk that you took, and it sounded like it really paid off. And, content, a lot of it is about being who you are and bringing your own talents and strengths to whatever you're creating. So I think it's important to own who you are.
So, I mean, that certainly led to, like I said, kind of the way I view how I live my life and also just how I run my businesses. There are a lot of lessons that kind of came from that. It totally changed the way I just think about things, and I think for the better.
Wow. So what other kind of business or life lessons have you learned from your experience running BestTechie?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, don't be afraid to be rejected. The word no seems a lot scarier than it actually is many times. And I have gotten no a lot, even with simple things like just wanting to meet someone or talk to them or interview them or whatever.
Sure.
Sometimes they just don't have time. Sometimes, at that particular moment, it's just not good for them. Other times they just don't want to meet with you, and that's fine. But I always believe that no doesn't mean no always. It just mean, it could just mean no for right now. And I'm also a believer that persistence is important, especially when being an entrepreneur. You got to be persistent because there are a lot of people who would tell you no. But then, you know what? There's also people out there who will tell you yes. And sometimes it only takes one yes to kind of outweigh all those no's. So just something to keep in mind. Another thing that I've learned over the years is that hiring is actually really tough.
Yeah.
Like, it's really, really tough. Early in my career, I was coming at it from the perspective like, all right, I need to hire a couple people. Here's what I need. I'll put out the job posting. People are going to apply. I'll write back. They're going to be so happy to talk to me. And like, I'm going to be paying these people. Of course, they're going to get back to me. So first of all, just because someone applies and then you reach out to them to talk to them doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to actually reply to you.
Right.
Which is weird to think about, like, because why else would they apply? But sometimes, people just mass apply, and if you write back, they're like, I'll take a second look, and they're not interested. The other thing is that you can make an offer to someone that you really like. They may say no, and they may go with another opportunity.
Yeah. And
these things, I just didn't think of them immediately until it started happening. I was like, oh, you know what? That could actually happen. It's just strange. Other things that I've learned a lot, there's just so many, like there are points, especially when running a business, being an entrepreneur, founder, whatever, there are points where you just need to step away from what you're doing. It's just take a step back and don't even like think about work. Don't even try and reflect on what you're just like, do something completely different. Watch TV, watch a movie, read a book. And when you're stepping away, I'm like a fan of reading books that, are of all different kinds. Don't read like a book on like entrepreneurship or business.
Right.
Read a more fun book. I'm a huge fan of the Harry Potter series, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be anything, but just something just to take your mind off what you're doing. Because when you come back later on, you typically get, a fresher perspective on things. And kind of to piggyback on that, this is something I realized after many, many rough days, where being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster. It's 1 minute you're up, the next minute you're down, then you're up, then you're down, then you're up, and then you're up for a little bit, then you're down for a little bit. And the important part is that you don't get caught up on today's problems or today's problem. Trust me on this. In a few weeks, that problem's going to be behind you, and you're not even going to remember what it is in a few weeks' time. Because there's so many things that are going on when building and operating a business that you have to make sure you see the forest through the trees. And the last two things that I'll mention that I've learned, these are super important. I think that one is don't forget to celebrate the small wins. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs, people like me who are building these businesses are so focused on the long-term vision, right?
Yeah.
That they forget to celebrate the little wins that they accumulate along the way. And because you're so focused on the long-term thing, it's like, all right, great, we accomplished that, on to the next thing. I'm not saying rest on your laurels, but you have to kind of acknowledge that, yeah, you had a win here. That's great. Now take it and celebrate it for a little bit, and then you can go on to the next thing. I think that's super important that a lot of people don't do it, and they should. And the last thing I'll mention with regard to lessons that I've learned is this is super important, but you are not your business. Especially when you're told no, just remember that, because you are not your business. It cannot be stressed enough that what you're building and you are two separate things. It may feel like you're so connected. And trust me, I get that, having built BestTechie for 15 years and worked on another startup that I recently shut down in late 2017. Mm-hmm. It's tough. You feel so connected to that thing, but you are not your business, and don't get that mixed up.
Wow, that is a host of great advice. I'm thinking you should write a book or something. You easily could. So many important things. And yeah, a lot of advice that makes sense when you hear it, but it's easy to forget to do things like celebrate the quick wins. Because you said you're going to be up and down and up and down. And you really need that to help you keep your perspective and keep you moving forward towards your goal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many things that, like you mentioned, outside the moment, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense, right? Mm-hmm. But in the moment, it doesn't always come back into your mind as something that you should be doing or that makes sense to you. Yeah. So it's just something you have to be able to keep in mind consistently and recognize when you're in a moment like that, recognize the appropriate step that you should be taking.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so you've been an entrepreneur for quite a while now and had some really great success building and evolving BestTechie. And you mentioned a few minutes ago that you had recently shut down another company that you were working on. I would love to learn a little bit more about that and just sort of understand more about what that company was about and what kinds of lessons you learned from running that company.
Yeah, so that company was called Kaya. Mm-hmm. It was an analytics company. So it was a SaaS-based business. That was the business model. And essentially, the way it came to be was I've always had a really big interest in data analytics, deriving insights from all these data points. And we talked earlier about how I use data and analytics to kind of come up with the content strategy that we focused on at BestTechie. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to do with Kaya was take things that I was doing and the way I was looking at data and kind of bring it to everyone. So what we did was we built an analytics product that was, for content creators, for digital media companies. And the whole goal was to make it so they could spend less time staring at numbers and more time creating engaging content for their audience. Mm-hmm. And what I ended up doing was I raised some money, $200,000, and I went out and literally I just had this idea, and we had no product yet, no MVP, no nothing. I was able to raise the money, and then I went out and I put together a team to build the product, start building the product. Now, keep in mind, I had never done product management or built a product before from the ground up. So it was a whole new experience for me. Yes, I had built BestTechie, a content-based business, and I was familiar with that, but I had never built an actual product that other people would be signing up for and logging in and using it and doing all this stuff with and using it to understand their audience. And it was just a completely new experience for me. And the ultimate goal, if we got to where we wanted to be, was to be the data scientist for our customers and provide them with these smart insights in plain English. So you didn't have to be like a real data scientist, or you didn't have to be a scientist of any kind mm-hmm. to make sense of what was going on your website mm-hmm. or whatever the case may be. And we built a product that I'm really proud of. And I think we did a lot of that. We started implementing new types of functionality and features that we're starting to see now come to fruition on existing products, such as our smart insights, which I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. Literally what we did was we did all these calculations on the data that we were collecting for you. And then we bubbled up super interesting facts, things that you could utilize and act on immediately. So that was very important to me because I feel like analytics and data today there's just so much of it out there. A lot of these companies are collecting it, but they're not taking advantage of it in the appropriate way. Mm-hmm. And that was the whole point of Kaya. We wanted to build something that was easy to use, that anyone can sign into and start seeing and understanding. Here's the type of content that works best on your site. This author has the most engaging content or is generating the most number of page views, or when you write about these topics, that's when you get the highest time on page. Things like that are what we did provide to our customers. As I mentioned, unfortunately, it didn't work out as planned because we had to shut it down in late 2017. That particular industry it's a tough industry. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of money being spent from smaller publications, which is who we were targeting originally, on these types of tools, unfortunately. And that ultimately led to it, not being a sustainable thing for us to continue to create.
I see. So that sounds like it was one of your biggest challenges, was that the audience that you were serving maybe didn't have the funds to be able to pay for a service like that, or maybe certainly they would need types of digital analytics, but maybe the need wasn't strong enough to justify the spend for some of these smaller companies.
Right. No, that was absolutely the case. We went into it thinking, and I had talked to a lot of people and companies about what we were building early on, to get feedback, and they're like, that would be great if we could do that. And I think ultimately what happened was, the industry could have gone one of two ways, and it went the way that I was betting against. Mm-hmm. So, I truly believe that this digital media industry will be spending more time and more money on content analytics at some point in the future. I still think they will. We couldn't wait that long, unfortunately. What they did in the meantime is they've been trying to, make money from every last eyeball that makes it onto their site. So they're investing more in tools to help monetization as opposed to analytics.
I see. Wow. So through that whole experience, what would you say were the biggest lessons that you took away that you can now apply to maybe other businesses that you might want to start, or even the business that you're running now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things, like I mentioned so far, that I definitely took away from building Kaya. I think about it more from things that I learned along the way, skills that I would have never learned otherwise, like product management, like B2B sales. These are all things that I've learned how to do now that no one can take away from me, that are amazing skills and things to have. So I learned a ton of skills that I otherwise probably wouldn't have or get somewhere else. So these skills, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to take into a different job at a company, if I went to work somewhere else, or if I were to launch something new, these things I would be with me. So I learned a lot. Like I said, product management, like building a product from the ground up, from nothing into something, in and of itself is a huge success because, not everyone can do that, right? Mm-hmm. Not everyone can say, oh yeah, I built the product from the ground up. I laid out the roadmap and I worked with my CTO on developing this, that, and this, and making sure that it actually functioned and that people could use it. Like, it's such an incredible feat if you really think about it. That's how I look at it, at least. When people start businesses and they fail, they're always like, why? Or, what can you learn from on a 30,000 foot level? But, I'm trying to think about it from, here are things that I did that are hard skills that not everyone has and that not everyone has done, and that I think are valuable and will prove useful going forward in some other way.
Yeah, that's a great point. In my day job, I work in training and talent development. So the focus on how to build those skills, sometimes you have to do them through experience. And certainly being an entrepreneur, you really need to have a whole variety of skills. And even ventures that you work on, just because you may have to close them down in the end, it doesn't mean that you don't have those skills that you've had real true experience developing and honing, that you can now take these that you wouldn't have before and apply them to the future or to your current businesses. So yeah, I think that's a really powerful lesson to take away from this.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
You also have started in with a different type of content creation that we haven't talked about yet, which is the world of podcasting. You have a podcast that's called TechieBytes. So would love to learn a little bit about that, why you started the podcast and what's that all about.
So TechieBytes was originally a individual venture that I started just because I'm not sure if you're familiar with the company Anchor. Mm-hmm. They created a podcast platform. And I downloaded the app one day in February, or a year or so ago. And I was like, this is really easy. They've really done a great job on making it easy to create a podcast. So I did like 2 episodes, just me talking about different things, 2 or 3 episodes. And then I was like, you know what? I have such an amazing network of people that I know. Let's bring them on and let's record something and make something that people can listen to and get insights from and learn from, and where we just have an honest conversation about technology and business. So I decided to do that. And the reason, not only because of the network that I have and that developed over all these years is, I have super interesting people who can be on, but also I just love talking and meeting people. One of the things I was really good at Kai and BestTechie is just business development and just meeting new people. I'm one of those guys who goes into a room, knows nobody, and comes out like knowing like 10 new people.
Cool.
Whatever. And I just love to, hear people's thoughts on things and provide my own kind of insights and thoughts based on my experiences. And that's the whole point of TechieBytes. It's really about creating a podcast where we have an honest conversation about technology, but also where the listener will get insights, but also I want them to come away thinking that they learned something, or that even if they didn't learn something brand new, maybe they're thinking differently about something they previously thought one particular way about. And that's the ultimate goal with TechieBytes, is really coming down to helping people learn more about technology and the business and different elements of the business. For example, we've done episodes on raising money with venture capitalists on. We've done episodes on wireless charging, which is the future, obviously, for charging all your devices. We've had someone on who's the CEO of a company there. We've talked about e-commerce. We've talked about marketing. We've talked with various CEOs and industry executives from all across the tech industry. It's just such a great, I think, way to learn, because it's convenient, it's portable. You can literally be walking down the street, listen to a podcast, or on your commute and things like that. And that's why I really like the format of the podcast. It's easy to listen and it's just always available to you. For me, a couple of things I've learned about creating a podcast: schedule is key. Mm-hmm. And then keeping that schedule of for us, it's every Tuesday, and making sure that, people can rely on it. Super important for a podcast, because if you're not reliable, they won't take the time to work you into their schedule, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know as a podcast host, but also a podcast listener, the podcasts that I listen to that release on a regular schedule, the ones that I really like, I'll open up my app player in the morning and be like, okay, it's Wednesday. I want it to download. Because I want to listen in the car. So yeah, absolutely. When you can get that level of engagement from your audience and you're reliable and you're creating that consistent content. And it sounds like you're bringing these lessons about technology, you're engaging your network that you already have, people who are experts in specific parts of technology, having them come on. And it sounds like they're also able to explain the technology in simple enough terms for people to understand. So it's not as complicated or intimidating for the audience to listen to and really understand some of these trends as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And one of the things about BestTechie that's part of our mission statement, really, is that we want to make technology easy for everyone. And that's been the case since day one, since I started the site. It's always been about bringing technology to a level that even someone who's just casually interested in technology can follow along and get something out of it. That's always been the case. And that's especially also the case with TechieBytes. Having people on who are very fluent or experts in their field enables me to talk to various different things while getting actual, solid insights that are not from Mars. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely having people who know what they're talking about on, especially when it comes to things like technology and business, where people are looking for help, that certainly is something that we strive for and that I strive for every time we record a new episode. And also with our written content and video content as well.
Yeah. So is TechieBytes kind of, in terms of branding, is that an offshoot of BestTechie, or are they independent and one features the other? Or how do those tie together?
It's just a podcast arm, I guess you could say, of BestTechie.
Cool.
Everything I do online, these days, obviously with the exception of Kaya. Kaya was its own business, its own unique entity, completely separate. But everything else I do, including the podcast, including the videos, are parts of BestTechie, kind of under the umbrella. So if you went to the BestTechie website, besttechie.com, then you could find the TechieBytes podcast. Of course, it's always also on iTunes and things like that as well.
All right, fantastic. Wow. Well, Jeff, it was great to talk to you today. I think that you've taught us some really amazing lessons around content creation, reusing and repurposing content, growing audiences, learning from your own businesses and your own entrepreneurial ventures. And I was really excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for sharing so many incredible lessons with us. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about BestTechie or TechieBytes, the podcast?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks, Carolyn, for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been really a lot of fun talking to you about all this stuff. And I do hope it's been helpful to the listeners. And if you're interested in getting in touch with me, there are a couple ways you can do it. The best way is probably to email me, jeff@besttechie.com. You can also find me on Twitter. It's just my name, Jeff Weisbein. And I'm sure Carolyn can have links in the description as well.
Absolutely. I will put those in the show notes. Jeff, as we close out, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know or anything else that they can help or support you with?
No, I just appreciate everyone being on. If you're interested in technology and or business, I would love if you gave the TechieBytes podcast a listen. And again, if I can be of any assistance to anyone who's listening, I'm more than happy to do that. Feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being on my podcast today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Beyond 6 Seconds. Please help us spread the word about this podcast. Share it with a friend, give us a shout out on your social media, or write a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. You can find all of our episodes on our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.